Well, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is John Slocum. I'm part of Black Executive Men, the group, and it's good to be a part of a fellowship and community with you, brothers, and looking forward to learning more and being able to continue to grow in this area of professional development. Today we have on Mr. Bassey Duke. He is going to be talking to us about gaining power through knowledge, and I'll let him introduce himself and we'll leave room for questions or any other thoughts that you guys might have at the end here. So, Bassey, take it away.
Okay, cool. No, thanks everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to touch on this topic. So we would get cracking. I've got a few slides. I'm going to go through a bit of content. So touch upon, what is knowledge, why is it important, the ways we can get it, and then a bit of a case study at the end, right? So a bit about myself. So my name is Bassey. I am really from Nigeria. I am based in Dublin, Ireland, in Europe. So for some people, your day is about to start. My day is about to finish, right? But that's the beauty of this network is that we can all connect in different time zones. So I've been fortunate enough to work with different corporates. So I work for a company called Eaton, which is US based. I've worked for Motorola in the past. I've worked for IMI. I've worked for Amco. So I've experienced the corporate world, but also the last 7 years, I set up my own company called Prune Consulting, and we focus on, supply chain, logistics, um, procurement, and leadership. And I've been fortunate to live in different countries. So we've been able to win a few awards. So as I said, set up August 2017, and we've been able to go from, I guess, micro to being a small/medium-sized enterprise now. So today is not about me or Prune, but today is more around knowledge. So we just jump straight into it. So, what is knowledge? Knowledge is the understanding, the awareness or familiarity acquired through experience, through education, and through learning, right? It is the body of information and facts and skills and principles that an individual or group has accumulated over time. So it's a function of time. So we've got to be intentional when it comes to knowledge. We've got to go out and seek it through experiences, through education, through learning. So BEM is a great platform whereby we get to have one-on-one, and through that experience, we also get to build our knowledge. Plus, there's education, there's some education whereby we also get to build our knowledge through that and then learning. So knowledge is important. So now let's touch upon a bit on why is it important, right? So one, it helps us understand the world better. So the world that we're in, the more we know, the more we understand. And that leads us now being able to make better decisions. So the more we know, the more we're able to now make better decisions in terms of be it for our careers, be it for our businesses, right? Also enables us solve problems. So, be it from the career perspective, so a company employs an individual because they want you to solve problems that they are not able to solve, right? Or looking from a customer perspective, a customer looks towards doing business with you because you have a solution which they need and they're unable to solve, or they don't have resources to also solve it, right? Knowledge also fuels our personal growth. So the more we know, the more we grow. So a good example is one thing I did in my career was emotional intelligence. And as you know more about yourself, the more you grow and your comfort zone expands. It also develops you. It also enables progress and, innovation. So, one of the projects I worked on early on at Prune to solve a GPS tracker problem for a customer that was US based. And the original brief was let's save them money. But ultimately, that then drove to us designing a product for them. And then that became a profit center for them. But this was based on the fact that my background is engineering, although I am in the supply chain. I was able to now apply my knowledge engineering to now redesign a product for a company. And then we then went to Asia to now source it, and then sourcing it, doing the quality control, and then we have products now being shipped to the end customer. It also empowers us because the more we know, the more we can do, the more problems we can solve, right? It fosters understanding and fosters, connection. So in summary, knowledge enables us to solve complex problems, which we will face as individuals or within our careers or within the companies that we work for. An interesting thing which I came across, which is another reason why, knowledge is important, is that, now let's look at our representation. So on the left side, there's an article that I found from 2021, which showed that, America is pretty diverse, right? Compared to like Europe, where I'm based. But in saying that, though, from 2021, our demographics only accounted for 2.8% from number of firms owned. Then look at it from a revenue perspective, then accounted to 1.1% revenue in all of Americas. This is important for us because this is why we're here. We're here to try to see how we can improve the Black representation. Now, what's also quite interesting though is that on the other side, now look at it from a C-suite executive, and looking at the top 500 companies, Fortune 500 in the US, from a CEO perspective, out of the 500 companies, only 8 of them have Black CEOs, which means that also not represented in that demographics, right? And why it's not important because, we want to get to a place whereby we can increase the representation from Black-owned business perspective, but also improve representation from a career perspective for those who are aspiring to be the future CEOs, right? So some of you might have been on the fire chat we had earlier on today, 2 hours ago. And what's quite interesting though was that one of the things the guys shared in that fire chat was that from a career perspective, right? When you get into a job, which is kind of interesting, some companies look at you to see that you're able to not just do your boss's job, but also be able to do your boss's job. So two level. So being able to come in at a certain level, but have the knowledge and demonstrate the ability that you can do two skip levels jobs while you start in that company. That's pretty phenomenal, right? Then as a business owner, getting to a place whereby, we are the best at our craft. We are the best at what we do, right? So that involves sharpening our skill sets in terms of being a functional expert in what we do. So in the example of my case, so being excellent at supply chain, logistics, procurement, and leadership, and being able to demonstrate that through work that we've done, but also demonstrate that through academic qualification. And also, addressing thing I also mentioned in the fire chat today was, from those that, are career driven, get to a place whereby we are finding the hardest problems to solve for the company that we're working for. And similarly, from a customer perspective, look for those hard problems that our customers want to solve and be there to now solve those problems for those customers. So I'll give you two examples from my career. I remember when I worked for Eaton, I ran their European logistics for them. So that was roughly 120 factories all across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So I remember there was one Saturday where one of the vice president called me and said, look, we had a problem in the supply chain whereby the factory in China was delayed in trying to get a part for an OEM customer. And what he wanted me to do is now manage your supply chain from start to finish, which meant working with the Chinese factory, now working with DHL to try to get this to get to the end customer in the UK Monday at 6 a.m. in the morning, right? So basically, it's going through the shipment all through the weekend up to Monday. And this had to be at the customer for 6 a.m. in the morning. Otherwise, there's a line stop. And those of you that work OEMs know that typically in the contract, when there's a line stop, that leads to costs incurred every day. So I was able to solve that. Being able to solve that, now you're in a position whereby they now see you as the subject matter expert. So similar with our customers, being able to get there and solve, complex problems that our customers have. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So broadly speaking, knowledge is split into 4 buckets, right? So the first one being, what I term factual knowledge. So this is knowledge of objective facts, which is driven by data, driven by information, right? So this is now factual information, right? Where we learn things based on facts, right? So based on, laws or principles. Then we have procedural knowledge. So this is knowledge on how we perform certain tasks. So certain activities. So to do certain things have to go in a certain sequence. So we go to good example, when you go into like assembly plant for a car, you notice that as you go down the plant, different things are installed in different parts of the process. So they could start by the chassis, then maybe they do the doors, then they do the in tray, they do the seats. So this is all done based on procedure, right? The third one is now conceptual knowledge. So understanding of ideas, of theories, and how all of these relate between themselves, right? And the fourth one now being tacit knowledge. So this is implicit, this intuitive knowledge that is difficult to articulate or codify, but it's important for us to get to a place whereby we identify and know these four types of knowledge. Okay. Now, what are the ways? So this is by no means an exhaustive list, but it's important for us to identify some of these because this is how we now equip ourselves. This is how we now get the knowledge that we need to get. So the first one is, observation. So a good example is children. So we look at children, children observe the environment, children observe what they see. And I liken children to be like sponges, whereby they don't necessarily have natural filters. So whatever they see, they emulate. Whatever they observe, they do. Right. So this is one way of us, gaining knowledge. The second one, non-experimentation. So, we test, we try different things, we see what works, we see what doesn't work. And so good example is social media. So my experience social media, we try different things. You now see what people like, what works, what drives interaction, what drives engagement, and then that shows you what works, what doesn't. Then there's the bit about reading and research. So this is now taking the time to now read on the subject matter, researching the subject matter and seeing what resources are available to now equip you with new information, with new knowledge. And then the fourth one, which is very common, is formal education. So from primary school to secondary school to university undergraduate to postgraduate, your masters, your bachelor's, your PhD. So formal education is important because this is one way in which we get a lot of knowledge in terms of from a subject matter perspective. But what's kind of interesting though is that what I've seen a lot is that what people typically study is not always what people end up becoming in life. They typically sometimes, like in my example, I did mechanical engineering, but now I do supply chain, I do logistics, I do procurement. What I found a lot is that a lot of the disciplines I had in engineering is what has helped me to now be able to do supply chain because engineering involves a lot of maths, a lot of physics. You're trying to solve problems, and I think that's put me in good stead to be able to solve problems. Then we have our life experiences. I believe why some total experiences that we've had, and that what shapes us and shapes who we are today, right? Then conversation and discussion. So good example is today. I'm presenting, we're having a conversation, which is going to lead to a discussion at the end, and this is how we then learn new skills. Okay. Then we have others which are more like contemplation and reflection. So we've experienced something, we now contemplate, we now reflect, and then from that reflection we now say, okay, what do we learn from the experience? So it could be an experience, could be something we've read, could be something we've attended, and now reflect. So good example would be last week I spoke at a conference, I attended a conference, and then based on that, there were a lot of great nuggets that came out of that conference. But now being able to now reflect on what I've heard and now see, okay, how do I now apply the knowledge as an individual and then within the company context. And then travel and exploration. So, travel is a great one because you get to experience different cultures, different ways of life, right? So in my career, I've been able to, I'm fortunate enough to have lived in originally Nigeria. I've lived in the UK. I spent some time in the US. I spent some time in Germany, and then I'm in Ireland. And even in the UK, I lived in Scotland, I lived in England. So that's given me quite a bit of exposure in terms of, different cultures, different experiences, which, has made me who I am today. And then there's things like apprenticeship. So a good example is I know in Nigeria, we have a tribe called the Igbos, right? They have a phenomenal apprentice program in place. So what they do is typically you'd go to the guy that's going to do the apprentice for you. I think you spend like 7 years with the person. So this person teaches you his craft, teaches you his trade for those 7 years. And then at the end of the 7 years, he then opens a business for you where you can now demonstrate all the craft he's taught you on, right? And I think that's pretty phenomenal. Then concurrent to that, we also have mentorship. So mentorship, you know, involves someone that, you know, shares a lot of the experience with you, right? And based on that experience, you then learn certain things. So mentorship and coaching sometimes are used interchangeably, but in reality, they're slightly different. So coach will be a good example, be coach of a basketball team, whereby he or she is trying to make you the best at that functional skill. So the slight difference between, coaching and mentoring. And then another way of gaining knowledge, being part of groups like BEM. So BEM is a great platform. Highly recommend, have your one-on-ones with people, through those one-on-ones, share, ask questions. It's a great opportunity to learn and to gather knowledge. And one thing I've experienced on BM that everyone's willing to share. Everyone wants to share. Everyone wants to learn. I think that's a great way for us to now get knowledge. Then attending conferences. I give example, I spoke at one last week and I attended one last week. And I think, one thing I love about conferences is that it takes me away from work. So for that 2 days last week, zero mind on the operational side of work. But in that conference, I got to meet my peers. I got to meet other business owners. And there was so much content in that conference around, from a business perspective, what others are doing, what I should be doing. And I think that then builds up my knowledge. And out of that, I came up with action, which I'm going to implement. And then the last bit is then continuous learning. So learning is not a one-time event. It's something that we've got to, keep on doing, keep on aspiring, and yeah, keep on doing. So currently, I'm doing a course on import and export on customs, just to refresh, my understanding of customs, because something I've done before, but it's, I believe that, you know, learning is not a one-time event. Learning something that we do continuously, and we have to continually do, and we get rewards from it. Okay. Any questions so far? Take a minute to just see if there's any questions. Okay, cool. So that's now the ways of learning. So something I thought it was worthwhile to now do next was, just share. I looked at, some of the top Black CEOs in America, right? And so these are an exhaustive list, but I think it's worthwhile for us to, you know, spend some time post this event to look up these guys and see. So those that want to ascend to become CEOs, it's great to see what these guys do. So, I used to work for Eaton, and when I was working for Eaton, Craig Arnold now became the CEO and chairman of Eaton, and he's regarded as one of the top CEOs in America. But I think it's good to now see from their LinkedIn, what's their career path been? What have they done? How were they able to break the mold? So research shows that typically, you know, within corporate and career, yes, part of it is having the knowledge to be able to demonstrate you can do things, right? But also, another part of it is also exposure, right? I think something that we don't do a lot is, having exposure within the company. Reason why I see that is the fact that, I've been in meetings whereby you do calibration for people, right? And what's powerful is if you're in that meeting and others also contribute for someone you're looking towards calibrating. So calibration means, for example, I've got a team of three. And in that meeting, I'll talk about the three and how well they've done. What complements that if others in the room can also say, oh yes, I've worked with this guy, I've worked with this lady, they've done a great job, I've got exposure to what they've done. So I think exposure is one of the big things that we need to do. So knowledge is important, but also having that exposure so people can know and see what you've done, see what problems you've solved, right? I think that's critical from a career perspective as you want to go up the career ladder. Something else I also realize a lot though is that as you go up the ladder, right, there's a stage where you get to where you notice that there's some common denominators in terms of from an academic perspective. So I notice a lot that when you get from president level and above, 95% of people they have an MBA, right? So I'm not advocating that we all just go and get an MBA today. No. But what I've noticed though is that doing an MBA myself, these gives you tools, right? And tools are important because with tools you can then solve more problems for your end customer. and solve problems for your company. Then similarly, looking at the entrepreneurship landscape in America. So some of the top entrepreneurs in America. So CEO from Fubu, big on Shark Tank, right? Why is important? Because similarly, if we're going to run those big businesses, we need to see what others have done, right? And then learn from what they've done to be able to now implement this back into our business. What I found quite interesting though is I remember watching a documentary on Michael Jordan, and I remember at the time when Nike were trying to sign him up, documentary mentioned how his mom, came up and got him to sign for 10% of the revenue for the Air Jordans. And today he's living off that. So why is this important? Because we also have to surround ourselves with good people to be able to now achieve the best that we can achieve. So my second to last slide. So what are the action I'd like everyone to take from today's session is, few questions. So one is, where's your ultimate destination? I.e., where do you ultimately want to get to? Is it that you want to get to become the next CEO of the biggest firm in the US or in Europe or whatnot, right? Or you want to have a seven-figure business, right? The next question I'll ask you though is that, based on where you want to get to, what are the knowledge gaps that you identified? So, so as a business owner, I realize that there is knowing my craft, which is supply chain, right? But then there's also the bit about now knowing how to sustainably run a business and to run a business profitably, which is totally different. So sometimes I'm wearing the hat of sales, sometimes I'm wearing the hat of HR, sometimes I'm wearing the hat of finance. So being able to broaden your knowledge so that you can, slot into the different roles within the company. Because as you start, you may not necessarily have the headcount to have everything, but it's still good for you as a business owner to now know the different topics, right? Then third question is now, what steps or plans do you have in place to now bridge these gaps? So we identify, okay, we have some gaps in terms of what we want to do, be it, knowledge for career progression or be it knowledge for business growth, right? And then I guess last question I asked would be, how can I or, we being BEM help you to bridge these gaps? So that's my LinkedIn. By all means, connect with me. And thank you for today and open the floor now for questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Bassey. Great presentation. Looks like we have a question from Stan. Go ahead.
Hey, Bassey. How are
Hey,
you?
Stan, how you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for the great talk. I appreciate it. Can you talk about your perspective on the paradox of, accumulating so much knowledge that one becomes paralyzed when it's time to execute and make decisions? I like your thoughts on kind of driving that bridge from knowing to doing and then kind of keeping that process going. Does that make sense?
Sure, sure. So I'll answer it from, I guess, multiple perspectives. So one perspective would be, so I think it's good to know yourself, right? So self-awareness is important because then you now know your tendencies, and that enables you to the point that you said, if you know you're one that you probably procrastinate, or you're one that you accumulate knowledge, but you don't have that urge to now move. There's for you to know yourself. That's one side of it. Second side, I was so tell people to do is have a mentor, have someone they're accountable to, because your mentor is there to help you. Your mentor is there to also advise you. Your mentor is also there to hold you hand so that that step does not look as if it's impossible for you to make. Right. So that's the second piece. Then the third piece, I also believe you should have, a what I call wise counsel. So you have close colleagues or peers who also run business like you do, and that'll be a safe place for you to also share what you want to do, and then they can also share with you how you can get that done. Because a lot of time that step is not that difficult to make, but with these three things in place, I think you are able to also learn how to prioritize. Because I think as entrepreneurs, we're always bubbling with ideas, and that's great. But we also know that not everything can be done at the same time. So with these three things in place, I think you're now able to now know how to prioritize stuff and then get the right stuff done first, which will give you the most impact. Because as you start getting impact, you're motivated to now do more. Hope that answers the question.
Oh, no, that was super helpful. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Great question, Stan.
Any questions?
I do have a question. So, I love this topic, and personally, it was very timely for me and where I'm at in my career path. But I'm curious on what you would say. What do you think that conversation should look like? You mentioned being able to do your boss's job or being able to do your boss's job. And then being able to actually have a conversation where you're volunteering your services, your time, your energy, your knowledge to be able to solve the problems that are those complex ones and are a little bit more difficult. What do you think that conversation should look like with that
Okay.
person to say, hey, I want to, this is something that I believe I have knowledge in that I can help. What do you think that conversation should look like? And then what would you say on the flip side of that? What would you say to someone who maybe is kind of hesitant about having that conversation, doesn't want to have that
Okay.
conversation? Maybe it's like, you know what, you guys should be coming to me. I should be coming to you. What would you say, from that perspective as well, or someone who doesn't want to reach out to that person and talk about those things? I would love to hear that.
Okay, cool. So two questions. So the first question is I'll give the example of when I was at Eaton. So I was at Eaton, I was responsible for the logistics for them, right? And my boss was responsible for logistics and material management. And then his boss was responsible for supply chain. Okay. So in that context, first is for me to understand not just what my boss does, what my boss's boss also does, right? Because you're going to bridge that gap. You know what both of them do and how their roles differ, right? Once you now know what your boss's boss does, now the question then is, okay, are there any gaps that you know of which they know that you don't know? That's first point. The second point then is the opportunity for you to now step out of your comfort zone and now do something different. So, for example, if my boss goes on holiday, right, go up to him and tell him, now on holiday, what extra tasks can I do to make it easier so when you come back from holiday, there's less for you to do. Does that make sense? So now you're now stepping and now demonstrating to the organization you're willing to now take more on board, right? Or you have a conversation with your boss's boss, right? And asking the question, look, I'm interested in doing your role, right? Now, based on what you know about me, where do you think my gaps are? And what areas do you think I need to close so that in a year or two, you can consider me for that role? Does that make sense? So having those conversations to understand, one is your perspective of yourself, and then their perception of you, because they could think you're not competent in certain areas, but maybe you are, but you've just not demonstrated it. If that makes sense. So part of it is giving that visibility to your boss and boss's boss, but not only your boss and boss's boss. So other people you need to give visibility is at my boss's level. My boss's peers should also know me, and at my boss's level, supply chain, the peers should also know me. When I mean know me that I'm Bassey, know what I'm working on. So have the opportunities for them to get to know you, be it on a social perspective, but also from a work context. So for example, don't be scared to go talk to them about something you've done and you've done well. Something we don't do a good job at. Let them know, look, I did this and this was the result of what I did. Reason being is that in those meetings where they are talking about promotions, you need to have people that can talk about you in those meetings, like your allies, right? Apart from your boss, then it makes that discussion richer. So that answers the first bit. Then I can't remember the second question about if you don't have that. What was the second question you asked again?
Yeah, what would you say to someone who might be hesitant about having that conversation, or someone who almost feels like, I shouldn't be coming to you, you should be coming to me, right? Or even just maybe a nervousness, hesitancy and apprehension about, opening themselves up to that, because that can be, kind of nerve-wracking for someone if they're in that position and wanting to be able to grow. So I was just curious on what you would say to that person.
Yeah. So there are different ways you can tackle this. So one way you can tackle it is which I've seen it done, is that you can go to your boss and say, look, I want to have a company mentor who is at your boss's level, right? And then that person, as a company mentor, will now get to know you, and that's in typically a safe space, right? And that could be a place whereby you now get the confidence, and he or she can then introduce you to key stakeholders within the company to now have those conversations with. But I think part of this involves being vulnerable. I know we don't like to be vulnerable. Sometimes we have to be vulnerable, because us being vulnerable now, people see sides of us that maybe they don't naturally see, and they now see, oh, we're actually capable. Because at that time, people get promoted not purely on competence, is on what they call likability. The fact that they like you, the fact that they know of you, the fact that you get stuff done. But then if you now shy away from those conversations, then you may be great at what you do, but nobody, like marketing. You may have a great product, nobody knows about a product, the product will never sell. That makes sense. So getting to that place where we're comfortable enough that we can have those conversations, with our peers, with our boss's peer and our boss's peer, for them to now know that, look, this guy is there, this guy can do this, this guy has a track record of success. And then when promotion comes, typically then that is you then be part of that discussion. Hope that helps.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah. So
Stan.
let me just add one thing. So when I joined Eaton, right? I remember within my first month, I got to speak with the president of all of Europe in Eton, right? And that's something which, okay, may not be easy to get to, but if you have the opportunity to have one-on-one time with senior leaders, always take that, because that's the opportunity for you to now have those 5 minute elevator discussion for them to know you and know what you're about. And I think if you can get that opportunity, it's invaluable. And some of that could happen at social events when the company is doing social events. These things can happen in team meetings or whatnot. So when you have those opportunities, make the most of it. So almost prepare yourself for that 5 minutes conversation you're going to have with senior leaders to be able to now, in 5 minutes, tell them who you are, what you've done, and why they should now think of you for senior promotion.
Love that. Good stuff. Stan.
Sorry.
Yeah, I second everything that Bassey is saying. I just kind of thinking back, to what he's saying. It makes me think back to when I first kind of kicked off my career at PwC, and I just the way that I kind of pushed myself and just focused on a balance of solving the big problems, but at the same time being visible, wound up with me basically being selected to be the reverse mentor for the senior partner of all of the Southeast, who ultimately rose up to become the sort of one of the executive leads of the entire firm. So I second everything that Bassey's saying. So Bassey, just two additional questions for you. One is so when you say doing your boss's job and then knowing your boss's job, what's your perspective on the distinction between what the job description currently looks like today at the moment versus where you see it possibly going, and kind of making taking a stake or making a bit of a gamble on kind of positioning yourself to start to develop in a way that is going to help tackle that future problem in which it's going to evolve. So I'd like to kind of get your thoughts on that. Then the second part is you broke down, I think it was, sorry, maybe 4 to 6 different sort of types of knowledge, but I didn't see broad versus specialized. So I'd like to also get your perspective on what your sense is around at what stages of your career should you be kind of more broad as opposed to much more focused on being specialized.
Okay, cool. Let me answer the second one first and then answer the first one second. So I think what I've typically realized is that the more or the higher you go up the ladder, the more broad you are and the less specialized you are. Because if you think about it, as you go up the ladder, it's now more about managing people, right? And less on process. So in that case, you now have to know how to manage people, how to get the most out of people. Don't get me wrong, it's still good to be knowledgeable in the subject matter, but the more you go up, the less you get involved in the day-to-day activity. That makes sense, because you're managing, teams and teams of people. So you won't have time to necessarily do all the specialized stuff as you would like to, but it's good for you to still know, because for you to get the most out of your team, you also need to know the subject matter yourself, right? To be able to now guide the team, be able to now coach the team, be able to now mentor the team to get to the performance level you need them to perform at. If that makes sense.
That
So
makes
that's the
sense to me.
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I said that makes perfect sense to me.
So that's the second question. Sorry, remind me the first question again. I think that was a bit more
Yeah.
complicated.
So that first question was around knowing your boss's job and then knowing your boss's job. It was sort of looking at it from the standpoint of, how does the job look currently today, and kind of putting your energy towards
Mhm.
that, or is it about thinking ahead and kind of gaming out where this particular, it could be the job description, it could be the overall problem set within the industry, et cetera, where it's going, and then sort of shifting your energy towards solving for that problem in terms of problem or job description in terms of where the industry is going.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'll answer it this way. So I would say the first thing would be to understand the current state, right? And fully understand the current state. And that means knowing, okay, what's required today, right? So if it's, so the example I gave a supply chain. So supply chain, you got to understand not just the cost savings, you got to understand the factory footprint, what are the risks, where supply demographics, where customer demographics, all that good thing, right? Then you knowing the challenges of the company, because now you are more closer to the front line before you now get to your boss's position, and then you now knowing the external factors, right? Yes, it's okay for you to now know what that future state may look like and change, but I think the first you need to demonstrate to the company, from my experience, is that you can run it at the current state, right? So based on what they require today, you are able to now demonstrate that, look, you can run it. You've got a track record of success. You've implemented complex things. You're one that always delivers. You're one that goes over and beyond. I think that's the first thing to achieve, right? Once that's been achieved and you are shown to be someone that delivers, that will then open the door for you to have those conversations to say, okay, look, we can do things differently. So if you first come in with we can do things differently, I believe doors will be shut. But if you first come in with the fact that, look, I understand all this and I've got a track record that I can deliver, that almost opens the door for it. Now I have this conversation to say, okay, look, in addition to this, we can do things smarter, right? We can do things differently. So I'll then practicalize that. Sorry, and you have a question, practicalize that. So you might have an example of of eating, right? So I remember coming on board. I started with transport, then I went to warehousing, then I went to different roles. But I only got those opportunities once I proven myself in transport, then that door open. And then once you've had this track record of success, they're able to now say, look, why don't we do things differently? So remember, one of the big things that we did is we outsourced one of our warehousing to a third party. And I would never had an opportunity if I didn't show myself faithful in getting transport done. If that makes sense. So, Stan, again, you've got another question?
Yeah. Thank you for answering that. Before I jump in, I wanna pull back here and give the opportunity and floor to anyone else that may have a question. Uh, all right, I'll proceed with another question.
Go for it, Stan.
So, you've said a couple times, always deliver, always, um, you know, just driving results, right? And I certainly can appreciate that. Do you think though that a new young professional, and I just, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm reading between the lines, when you say things like that, that there's elements of demonstrating resilience, right? Demonstrating that you can
Yes.
bounce back from and sort of handle missteps and demonstrate a level of maturity, right? Because I was mentoring or just kind of, giving a quick mentoring call. Someone pointed new, I think he's a junior in college right now, and he's trying to just kind of get his head right around, how to even think about corporate America, life, etc. And one of the things I imparted to him was not this pursuit of perfection, because Bassey, to what you said, right? Like if he heard that, I think he would interpret it another way in terms of I can never make a mistake. I have to be perfect every single time. I think that puts a different kind of pressure on
Yeah.
yourself, and it drives you crazy, right? So I just want to confirm that what I'm reading between the lines when you say that is there's a strong element of being resilient, demonstrating resilience, demonstrating your ability and maturity to handle mistakes or missteps, and being able to bounce back from it stronger, right? So before I move on, do I like did I read between the lines correctly there?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I've as a leader, I've made mistakes, and I'm still making mistakes. So I think we learn from mistakes. So yes, I talk a lot about overachieving, but there have been nights or days or times whereby things haven't gone well, right? And to your point, resilience makes you realize that look, even if it's not where you want it to be today, you have that fortitude to then press on and then think how you now get to where you need to get to.
Yeah, yeah, perfect, perfect. In terms of that resilient bit, I'd love to hear from you and just get your perspective on things that you've done to either build that resiliency, continue to build that resiliency, or even an example of where you've had to bounce back from a mistake or challenge as well.
Sure. So, to give an example, so prior to COVID, I also used to run a co-working space, like a shared office space, like your WeWork or whatnot, right? In addition to the consulting company. So now COVID happens and everything gets shut down. But then we've got a 10-year lease on our hands. So, now what do we do? Right. So making those bold choices that look, nobody knows what life look like after COVID. Right. We don't know if people are going to come back to the office. When they come back to the office, what does that look like? And being able to have that boldness, say, look, this we can't do. And now working with the landlord over 3 to 6 months to now get us out of this lease in a clean and ethical way. And we're able to do that to demonstrate to the landlord that look, this is not something we've created, but we're in this situation, which means that as a business we can't have this lease because nothing's open, right? So, going back to your question, so I think the different ways you build resilience, from my perspective, ways I've built resilience, one has been my faith. So as a Christian, my faith is something that undergirds me, whereby I have that hope that look, no matter how bad things get, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. I may not have the answers today, but I will press in and know that eventually I will get to the intended destination and get the answer I need to get done. So that's one. Two, I mentioned mentors, so typically I have mentors around me, and I think this is something and coach something that we need to explore a lot more. So this is a safe place whereby you're able to now share your challenges, and in that space, you get support, you get everything you need to now get to where you need to get to. Then there's also family. Your family also plays a crucial role because your family is almost your backbone to give you that support that when things, hit the roof, your family is always there to support you. And then I think, like anything, you have a circle of really neat, trusted friends. It don't have to be many, but those friends that will be there when you need them to be there, and they'll be your source of strength. So I think having this in mind has enabled me bounce back when things have not gone according to plan. I think it happens to everybody, but just having your rhythm and what works for you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and as I talk to young brothers and sisters, and even with my 7-year-old little girl, I have to always be mindful to balance any sort of guidance that I provide with a measure of, hey, by the way, you will falter, you will fail, right? But you'll get your biggest lessons from that. It's all about
Mm.
how you handle those missteps, right? It's all about how you, uh, uh, you know, build from the points where you feel like you've fallen and failed. So, anyways, it just I appreciate that thought. Thank you.
Oh yeah. And maybe just an example. I remember when I worked for a company called IMI, there was one tenant I ran that didn't go to plan, right? And I went to my boss and said, look, this is not going to plan. We need an additional 6 months and we'll get it back on track. So I think it's also being able to be open and transparent when these things happen that look, hands up, this hasn't gone to plan. And then not just doesn't go to plan and have a remedy in place. I said, okay, look, when are you going to now get this back on track? And what do we do within that time period?
Yeah, yeah, and if I could just add to that, right? What you said was key. So you didn't even go back to your boss with so yes, open and transparent. I agree, but I think what you didn't say, but you expressed is you went to your boss with a point of view on what the answer is and or
Yeah.
what a would look like, right? And that's something I would encourage everybody to just always be thinking in terms of come to the table with, okay, yes, fine, what the challenge is, define the challenge very, very well, right? Um, but be very quick to follow up with what the solution looks like, right? And what the solution could be, what the pros and cons are, right? Demonstrating sort of a holistic way of understanding the constraints, right, that come with the proposed solutions and ideas. So, anyways, very, very, very good thinking there, Bassey. Thank you.
So thanks, Dan. So any other questions?
Yeah, Bessie, I had one more question. So
Go for it.
a little bit about my current situation. So I work for a pretty unconventional in a retail sales environment, very professional selling environment, and I've been there uh since I was 21, and I am now or been promoted to a district manager position. And so doing that 24 years old has been in some ways challenging because what I am finding is that my performance, being a top performer in the company, got me to where I am now. But as I'm trying to level up and get to that next spot, I'm finding that I'm kind of what it feels like is I'm kind of hitting a brick wall because um, my sales performance and the things that I've done through that with my other locations and things like that that I oversee is not what it feels like is that it's not enough to outweigh the lack of maybe knowledge or experience or things like that. So this entire conversation has hit home for me, and I would love to just know from you, have you seen it to where having a hyper focus on gaining knowledge and gaining those different perspectives about these problems and looking at it in these different ways, have you seen where that has been able to um, outweigh maybe a lack of experience, right? Like I don't have 20 years of experience or anything like that. Like, would you say that you've seen how that the knowledge can actually outweigh the experience in the long run for
Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah. So I'll answer this in a few ways. So one way would be, um, I think it could be a worthwhile conversation to have with your boss to ask the question, okay, what do I need to demonstrate to now get to next level, right? And then that could then form your performance review. So, put that in writing. So for you, your next step would be what? His role, correct?
Yeah, next up would be a regional manager position, and after that, director of sales, which is where I want to get to.
Okay. So have the conversation with your boss now and say, look, my short-term plan is this position. Medium-term plan is ultimately I want to get the director position. So, what do you need me to demonstrate or have demonstrated so that I can be in a good position to get that director role? So I have that conversation now. So at least you know exactly what's required, right? But also what he thinks is lacking. So get it from your boss perspective. But also I think get it from your boss's perspective also. So get two perspective and then see from his perspective. Similarly, I want to get this role. What am I lacking or what do I need to do to now get to that level? Then I would also suggest is those that are doing the level today, right? So the two levels you mentioned, maybe, take them out to lunch and ask them, you know, what does the role involve? Create that atmosphere where you can understand from the guys that are doing the role today, what intricacies of the role. That makes it, because that's what you're aspiring to get to, right? So I think that would be, things I would recommend. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions from anybody else on the call here? And we got a couple minutes left before we wrap up. So just want to see if there's any other questions. Bassey, I know, is available in the professional development chat. So, if you guys have questions or if you want to be able to reach out more on a one-on-one level, you're more than welcome to do that. This presentation has, like I said, been extremely timely and gave a lot of great content, Bassey. So we appreciate that, and for just sharing your time and your knowledge with us on that, your experience and your stories, because it is truly inspiring and I think will help a lot of us out. So thank you so much for that. Doesn't look like we have any other questions, so we'll go ahead and conclude the call. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and your week.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Thanks, Bassey.